Yeah, this archive right here is the testament, it is the Dead Sea Scrolls, like you were saying, of skateboarding, because there weren't videos back then. There's not videos, there's not internet, there's not anything else that has documentation of skateboarding besides these magazines. And there were a few other ones like Skateboard World and stuff, but this was the Bible of skateboarding at that time and had every top pro, every best photographer was contributing to this magazine. So this is skateboarding encapsulated from that time.
Give me any other ideas you got, and tell us what you've been doing for the last 45 minutes.
My name is Richard Novak, and I'm sitting here under quite a lot of duress talking to Lee. So he wants to ask me some questions about what happened in the past. Anyway, the industry in the 60s was Makaha and Vitapack, and it was a fad. And it was totally controlled by the roller skate industry. And then in the first run of the early 70s, they took the product that was left over from the 60s and the 50s, and they tried to run it out as a fad, pretty much still under the thumb of the roller skate industry.
The first time we spotted the potential was about November of 1974. We did a little research amongst our advertisers who were presently advertising skateboard products in Surfer. They said yes, they would be interested, very interested in a skateboard publication. So that's when we started preliminary work, and we came out with the first issue in June of 1975.
And so Skateboarder came along, and we came along, and Ron Bennett came along, and GNS, and Bill Bain, and we were able to pull the industry out of the roller skate world and make it a real industry. How's that?
You have Warren Bolster, who's the editor of Skateboarder. I mean, the dude, Bolster could surf. He also could shoot surfing, but he was like this guy who was pushing photography as well. And he's shooting skateboarding as though it's surfing in urban areas, like on ditches and pools and banks on the street, everything.
This photo was taken by Warren Bolster. He was a staff photographer for Surfer Magazine. And then when skateboarding started getting strong, he was a skater himself, or would skate at La Costa with us. And then so he'd start taking photos, and then just really kind of saw the writing on the wall that there was a need for a Skateboarder magazine. So he pitched that to Surfer Magazine, and basically, like I said, yeah, he was in charge.
Well, they had Skateboarder before in the 60s, and they did 4 issues, and the sport died off then. So he said, let's bring it back again. So the second time around in the mid-70s, Warren pushes and gets it back and starts out as a bi-monthly.
This one inspired not only myself, but thousands of other young men and women to further push their limits.
Let's face it, the picture Greg Weaver, down in, I always love that photo. And Steve Cathy doing the same thing, and then there's, Bruce Logan and Jay doing the fucking nose wheelies and all that kind of thing. There's so many guys at that time frame because they had found like a whole new development. There was no houses yet. They had the roads. They were in there on weekends when there was no one around, and they can do what the hell they wanted. So that's kind of how it was in the 70s, where like they had so much more land in those days. Everything wasn't as built up. So whenever you kind of found anything or did anything, it was almost like you were on your own.
In the beginning, there was Warren, Leroy Granis, and Jim O'Mahony. And those guys were the guys running the magazine, so everybody was looking at what they were doing with their fish eyes and stuff, and copying them, and then coming up with their own look.
It obviously comes from surfing photography. Whatever, the magazine came from they made Surfing Magazine and they shot surfing, and it was an extension outside of that. So there's some sort of aesthetic that comes from surfing. A lot of the photographers had the same angles and everything, but they're capturing for the very first time things that had not been done. So of course the photos are amazing. I mean, you're capturing the moon landing, right? All fake and everything.
Every single kid read the magazine from cover to cover, and they read every caption, they read every story, they looked at every photo. And you could run into a kid that was from Nebraska. And he could, and you'd reference a picture, and they would say, yeah, that was that caption. It was page 42. Everybody did that.
Getting the magazine in February in Montana was the highlight of my week. You just laid in your bed and looked at the magazine, and you couldn't wait for the snow to melt.
I was living it, but they were living vicariously through these pages. And then they had to decipher this and apply it to their local scene. It was the magazine pipeline.
It's almost like you're looking at like the encyclopedia or something. Like, this is it. You know what I mean? You're looking at it and this is it. This is the holy grail every month.
James Casmus, skateboard photographer from 1976 to probably to the end of the skateboard, beginning of Action Now era, probably like 1982.
After Warren, moved away from the magazine, King James became the photo editor. And so he was in charge of shit, so he was the motherfucking king.
Back then, you wouldn't just go through the magazine and look at it, you'd get the photo, the magazine of the photo, and you'd sit there and study it. You'd stare at the thing for 5 or 10 minutes. I looked at what, Warren Bolster was doing and studying his photography. In those days, it wasn't, instant gratification like today. Every time you got a roll of film back from being processed, it was like Christmas. Sometimes you wouldn't get a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden you get the full-on gems. Couldn't even believe that you shot that.
I borrowed a camera from a neighbor, a 35mm camera, when I found this pool up in the hills above Kenter. And I invited Jay and Paul Constantin, LPC, to go to this pool. And I shot pictures, with a 35mm, a real camera. I met this guy in the banks, and I was showing him my photos, and he says, yeah, you should figure out how to, submit these to the magazine. And so I looked at the front of the magazine, and it had an address, and it said, for unsolicited contributions, send your stuff to P.O. Box 1028, Dana Point, California. And so I called the magazine, and I asked to speak to the editor, and I deepened my voice, because I was just a little kid. And I said, I've got these really incredible pictures of Jay Adams, who has been in your magazine before. And they said, don't worry, just send them down. We'll get them back to you. A couple months later, I got a little envelope with fucking Skateboarder Magazine stationery. It said, here's your check for your contribution to the newest issue of Skateboarder, with a tear sheet, just the page ripped out. And I don't really see it. And then I turn it over, and it's a fucking full-page subscription ad in the magazine with my name, which felt like it was this big on the page. It just said, photo Glenn Friedman on the bottom of the page, and a check for $40. And that guy who told me to figure out how to get them to the magazine on the bank, so I didn't know who it was Craig Stesser.
Anyways, what are we talking about? So I never had any intention of getting involved in anything to do with the magazines, really. Warren got hurt and couldn't do Tony's Who's Hot. They asked for other Who's Hots, probably.
He would pen these stories about our activities. I don't know that anyone's ever been able to do it any better in the skateboard world. I'm going to read a little paragraph that just jumped out at me, because it includes me and it includes Alva. Boys were dealing with things too rapid to be observed, the kind that were so quick that they are felt rather than seen. The documentation must be done in sequential overdrive, faster than the speed of life. It's the dog's eye view. You should have been here yesterday has become, you ought to be here tomorrow. Tell me about it. I'm getting chills right now just reading that.
Stesic was smart enough in a sense where he kind of created this whole world, because he got in with the Surfer Magazine guys. He used it as his own punk rock way of getting his world and his view out there through his art, more of an art project.
Magazines are just paper and print, unless you have, what it really counts is the ideas behind it. And Craig was the one that brought the ideas to speak to people saying, this is what it's about. This is what it is. This is concrete. 10-year-old kids are figuring out what to do with it, those kind of things. And I think there's two worlds. Some of them cross. There's the guys who read what Stesic wrote.
At an isolated spot in the middle of the desert scape, pit vipers were sharpening their plastic fangs on the offerings of cylindrical pipe. Their names are unimportant. It is their quest that is significant. Traveling hundreds of miles, sneaking about in appropriate camouflage, employing hand-drawn maps, eluding security guards, and spending countless dollars and hours perfecting their art. The practitioners exude a fanatical dedication that eclipses the common definitions of total insanity.
And I'm more the guy who saw the pictures, and the pictures alone told a different story than what was going on in the magazines. And that was, to me, the adventure of the adrenaline rush, rather than just how high can you jump, how fast can you go.
Larry Gordon, the ski-on of Gordon and Smith, would lecture me on my... Larry would be kind enough to critique my social orientation as espoused in those articles. He thought it was a very bad influence on young people.
We just saw like the Dogtown guys and those articles, and was like, that's where we're at. It was like this sort of renegade. It wasn't like the Bobby Piercy side of things. You know, no offense, I mean, it just wasn't where I was at. It was too rock starry, a different kind of rock star.
His photos mixed skateboarding with lowrider culture. You hear about all these things. You hear about lowriders, you hear about gangs, you hear about all that stuff as a kid. And we're talking we're kids. And he's introducing us to that, not in a bad way, in a very cultural way that says skateboarding is part of this whole underground world of everything.
Were you trying to make a living off writing, or did it just happen that you were?
No, not at all. I never tried to make a living off writing. I hate writing. I can't stand it. But it's tedious. Not as bad as interviews, but.
There was some crazy ads in Skateboarder.
They were the best ads ever. Yeah, but during the time of Skateboarder Magazine, the revolution of skateboarding and equipment and technology, and how it was changing every week, every other day, every month, every fucking hour, was insane. It went from skinny boards to wide trucks to skinnier wheels, blah, fucking blah. But it was exciting. It was a fucking great time to be a skateboarder.
And then you add all the gadgets that started appearing on boards, the nose blocks, the tail blocks, the sliders, the copers.
It's unique. Yeah, sure the hell is. People were just throwing stuff at the wall back then and hoping it would work.
I remember also looking at Val Surf, those ads. Yeah. And just going crazy.
Well, we opened in October of '62, and I believe it was in '63, in late '63, I think, is when our first mail order ad was taken in Surfer Magazine. Back then, it was the only mag that we really had, you know, to venture on out and see if there was anything to mail ordering skateboards, and of course, it turned out to be very successful.
So instead of an online store and Amazon, you would have the mail order. There was Canoa Surf, and my all-time favorite, Val Surf.
The thing that struck me more than anything was this page right here. That I can actually like, Mom, I want to get a killer board.
Old Canoa ads and Val Surf, and just wish I had this and that. And
we just to figure out what would work and what worked best as far as showing the product, as far as, you know, the individual shots, together with a coupon at the bottom.
Put your money in the mail and hope that something came in. Generally, it said allow 4 to 6 weeks.
To work in the magazine business back in those days, you know, there were no computers, there was no internet, there was no email, there was no software, there were no programs. Everything was made by hand.
You know, the process is we'd go out and, you know, shoot the stuff, get it developed, come back, look at it on the light box. Back then we shot a ton of black and white. Color stuff, they'd have to go get scanned, which was a big giant, like, $250,000 machine back then. And it was weird because it produced like 3 negatives then. Well, 4 of them to be CMYK. And then they'd process those into a color shot, a proof that we'd have to look at it and decide if the color was correct or not. But then those had to be made to exact size that we were using in the magazine. We'd have to get the type set. So the type would all come out like on a piece of paper, and then the art director would actually cut out the type, actually put the type onto the board, and then mark where the photo was going to be. And then that would all go back to the stripper, who'd actually put it all together with the photos. Then one of us would have to go to the printer and watch the thing print and make more corrections there. And it's like, you know, giant printing things just spinning like at 100 miles an hour. And you're making little decisions. Well, if that's too blue, too red, the machine would just spit out magazines for like 3 hours. Yeah, and then it'd fold it, cut it all, and put it together and bind it and box them all up. And it was like, you know, a 4-day process of printing the magazine. And the machine's running 24 hours a day.
This is July of '78, so that's like the pinnacle of the 70s boom of skateboarding. And it says gigantic summer issue, and you can feel the difference that it's so massive. And what they were saying, 300,000 issues were being shipped out at this time. Like every 7-Eleven had them. They were cooking at this point.
And it's growing like no other magazine that Surfer Publications ever grew before. Each issue is getting bigger, the ad revenue is getting huger. They're up to like 300,000 copies every month. And it's like one of the best-selling magazines of all the newsstands. It's making a lot of people money everywhere.
That's the biggest issue of Skateboarder there ever was up to the time. And I didn't shoot the cover though, I should have. You know, that was just one of the pictures I got in this issue. This picture of Kirk Talbot is the fucking best picture in the issue. And that shit is mine. You can't fucking front on that picture. That's a dope photo right there.
There's your example of how fast skating was moving. Greg Weaver on the cover in '75. Shoeless in here, getting a wheeler, getting some grind in there too.
I mean, Greg Weaver on the cover again. Cadillac Kid shredding, you know. We'd see this shit and we'd go, we're going skating, fuck it.
Stesic and Friedman never had the cover of Skateboarder. That could be political reasons. It's weird, but true.
You know, the thing about me and Craig never getting a cover is kind of amazing, because I'm certainly in good company. Because there's no question in my mind that we took all the best photos in the magazine.
Like flying out of the pipe here, that was my imitation of Jerry Lopez getting spit out of the pipeline. Of course, the Burt was after Larry Bird. So everything was all surf related to me.
What I would do, my little thing is, I would scan the photos first. Ooh, look at that. Al Garrett, frontside invert, like that's sick. Oh, there's Kiwi doing an invert. And then I'd go, okay, let's read the interview first, because the interview is the most important thing. Let's read that. And then after the interview, I read the who's hots. And then you look in the back and look at the product page, like, ooh, what kind of new kind of stuff's coming out? You know what I mean? If you read this thing, it wasn't like this, like a one-day thing, man. It was like a week thing.
Yeah, okay, so the magazine had different sections. In the beginning section, we had a tips section where we get a skater that would explain how they did their trick.
My boy Stropel, rocking a cess slide.
I would never go to like the middle of the mag. I would never go to the end. I wouldn't even open up the mag anywhere. I would only open it from the first page to the next page.
Each issue we'd probably have an interview, which was decided on who was the skater at that month.
You know, the interview is probably the most prestigious part of the magazine. To have that really solidified your status.
Steve Alba.
Anatomy of the World's Winningest Vertical Skateboarder.
Yeah. I was stoked that I got an interview, but I was bummed I never got the cover.
You know, the cover was rad, but it wasn't like the best in the world was always on the cover. The interview was like, you're one of the best in the world.
I got a letter from my grandfather that he had seen this in a 7-Eleven and how proud he was of me. Because up till then, you know, you were a skateboarder, you were definitely a pariah.
Cash McCandless, he was one of the owners of Hobie Skateboards. He called me El Gato because I was always landing on my feet. Yeah. I love this one because this is kind of one of the first kind of like extended straight arm as much as you can get.
Leather boots, leather pants, leather jacket, leopard print shirt. It was a bit shiny because I didn't know you're not supposed to put armor all on leather. It was one of those things where you just learn as you go.
Oh my gosh, you know what? I reread this about a year ago and I come off so cocky in this. And I'm really not cocky at all, but I read into it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was all about me. I think I got the interview because I won Skateboarder of the Year, which is great. I was super happy and really ecstatic to be able to put myself out there for women and to let them know that, you know, women can skate and women are strong and we like to do it too.
We cover contests, which was kind of funny because by the time they came out of the magazine, they were at least 3 months behind. Not like today where somebody does a trick and it's on the internet an hour later. You know, we should have invented the internet.
Skateboarder also introduced music. Some of the music was really a key component to skateboarding, I thought.
The Mellow Cat stories were like super interesting stories, and they were about all these different factions of skateboarding, and it was like localism, and there was like environmentalism, and there was like weed references because Mellow Cat got the munchies, and like I didn't understand any of that stuff when I was a kid.
Mellow Cat was Kurt Letterman. He kind of floated around the office, and I'm not sure what his job description was. He was a real guy.
I would obsess over every magazine, pore over it. My dream was to get a Who's Hot.
If you got a Who's Hot, it was more or less you were being like, you were going to become somebody.
This is my Who's Hot, 16 years old, riding for Hobie Skateboards.
You never knew who was going to get the Who's Hot, and you always wanted to get the Who's Hot.
I got Who's Hot. That was really dope.
Now this one's good. Wally, Tom Inouye. This is a hot one.
And that was my dream, get a Who's Hot.
Also, the skate cards were badass back then. That was like futuristic as far as I'm concerned. You know what? Oh, here comes this streamlined, weird rail, like a dragster or like a land speed car thing, trying to go as fast as you possibly can. That was wicked, and Skateboarder loved that. That Skateboarder was kind of diverse.
What were some of your favorite downhillers?
There were a lot of good downhill dudes, but there was this dude, John Hudson, that was really, he had like kind of mastered the tuck with tightening and pulling all of the body parts tight into a aerodynamic kind of tuck. And he smoked most of the dudes.
I remember skating down to the local grocery store and liquor store, going to the magazine section, and they didn't carry Skateboarder. They had like Skateboard World and Skate Fanatic or something, and it was like you could just tell that they were budget versions of what they thought skateboarder was. And that's all I had. So I bought those and I was just like, this doesn't seem like the apex of what skating is. And then finally I got to go to the skate park. They had Skateboarder Magazine at Oasis, and my whole life changed, like, because then I saw what was truly possible, and I saw the best of the best doing it.
Oh, boom, right there, okay. Yeah, I have to say, you know, again, I know this is kind of lame to say, like in an egotistical manner, but this is one of the most iconic photos of skateboarding, it really is. And it's me, living on the edge.
I mean, this was with a 135mm lens across the pool.
Time out. I got this board right here, which is basically the same board as this, right? All I need is blue cryptos with conicals right here, and I will do that at the combi tomorrow.
At this point, you know, I had carte blanche on film because I was working the magazine, so we could burn as much film as we wanted to. And to think back now, I didn't burn enough.
They would give us like bricks of slide film to shoot. We had to pay for our processing. So you definitely gave a lot of thought to every shot that you took.
Basically, we would just experiment, see what's going to work.
What kind of film were you shooting?
Strictly Kodachrome 64. And I'll tell you, that was really tough.
Imagine a picture so sharp and so vivid that the finest detail is etched clearly and unforgettably. That's why Kodak makes Kodachrome film, the sharpest color slide film you can buy. As you can see, the sharper you want your memories, the more you need Kodachrome film. From Kodak, America's Storytelling.
Glenn Friedman, Ted Terrebonne, Jim Goodrich. I mean, the list goes on. Craig Feynman.
Craig Feynman was a master. He was a real master photographer.
Ted Terrebonne, I think, came and he's like, yeah, I want to shoot a photo of your kid. And my dad's like, hey, he wants to shoot a photo. And I was like, oh, here's the photo. To get in Skateboarder Magazine was one of my crowning achievements in my whole entire skateboarding career.
My first photo was a full-page color shot in the magazine in 1977, Doug Saladino, Pineapple. It was a ramp shot. It was like one of those big quarter pipe wooden ramps. And then about 6 months later, Warren offered me a job on staff at the magazine. And that just changed my life.
We all shot with Jim Goodrich for quite a while. He was like the San Diego photographer.
I'd say my favorite then and my favorite now is really the raw places. The random ditches, curbs, a little bank up the side of a building, backyard pools, definitely.
The master of flash fill, I'd say, would be Wen Miller. He was like the full studio guru guy doing super high-end stuff in Hollywood.
Oh, this one. Oh, with the mask, yeah. One day, Warren Bolster called me and said, hey, Wayne, I'm really sorry. I have a picture I want to use on the cover, but the hires up won't let me do it. But I really love this photo. In those days, you had to have pads on the cover of the magazine.
You got to remember, you have to buy film to load it into your camera. You have to have the right lighting. You have to have the right focus. You have to have the timing, get the exact moment in time where it all comes together, where you tell the story of the whole day in that 1/500th of a second, right? So you look through the lens, you get everything as focused as good as you can. The timing. As a skater, you got better timing than anyone. You got a 500th of a second to get it. You don't get it, you miss it, you got to wait till next time if it happens again. You get the shit back, you look at it with a loop, and you be like, I got it.
As this trick started progressing, we started doing more motor drive stuff and sequences, kind of like this alley-oop Stropel. The first cameras were like, the motor drive ones back then were like, 5 frames a second, which kind of weren't cutting it. And then Canon came out with a 10 frame a second camera for the Olympics, which was an expensive camera back then. It was like, I don't know, $3,000. You burned a lot of film, and it was expensive, and it was really expensive when they didn't pull the trick.
There was no competition. There was nothing else. There was just Skateboarder. You didn't have there was no other media style outlet. Skateboarder was the one that was like, yeah, man, it goes this way, it goes that way, it looks like this, it sounds like this. Fuck yes.
Skateboarding, Can It Survive? By D. David. After years of domination as the world's favorite newly discovered thrill and pastime, skateboarding has gone past its peak and now is teetering between depression and resurgence. The public and the industry stand together and watching it take its course and jointly wonder, will it make it?
It did. It was so big, and it seemed like everybody was in, and then all of a sudden it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it just went, I mean, like the whole bottom fell out. I don't even know what happened. Do you guys know what happened?
Yeah, it had a good run for about 5 years. Then come 80, it's done. Disappeared. Skateboarder goes into action now.
Let's talk about the death of skateboarding, because I'm the bad guy, right? I think my article was called Can It Survive? And we just talked about, the status of the industry. The magazine was drying up. Advertising was drying up. Companies were going out of business.
We went in a meeting, and basically this is when all hell broke loose. We had to come up with a solution. Either we kill the magazine off, we work within our budgets, which would mean doing just a black and white magazine, or try to do a multi-sport magazine to subsidize the color pages.
And they called a meeting down there. They told us what their plan was going to be, which was we're going to have a magazine called Action Now. And this all came from D. David Moran and another guy. And that you're going to be paying 70–80% of the advertising, but you're only going to get 30% of the copy because we want to bring blah, blah, blah.
Bike riding, BMX, roller skating.
If you saw this as a kid, would you be like, yeah, I'm down? What do you do? I'm an Action Hour.
Action Now, like, I never bought it or anything. My friend Michael Durham would have it. I don't know, he had a subscription to it, and I'd look at it, but it just seemed like skateboarding was kind of just dead at the time.
People talk shit about Action Now. It's like, I respected those guys. They were trying to do a business. I was an artist. I did the best that I could with what I had. But they were trying to make a glossy magazine survive in a market where there was no money. I didn't like what was going on either. It was my life. I fucking cried when I heard that skateboarder was becoming Action Now.
In hindsight, Action Now was way ahead of its time, way ahead of, the X Games. So then finally it just faded away and disappeared.
someone could look at this like, well, that's ridiculous. Like all these dudes and they're like, I'm 55, what are you guys in your 40s or some shit, and like they're still blah 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 blah, like nerding out about stuff. But really, you can look at it the other way, which is like, what was it that makes all these people who had this experience at some point in their lives, and it's carried with them, so it's a part of their identity. It must be real. It must be real. You know, and you guys have gone around interviewing all these people and talking about skateboarding over and over and over and over. And you must see a continuum or a connection with every group.
Absolutely.
It's like you come in and you're like, oh yeah, that's that. Or Val Surf, right? What the fuck was that? Why do we all know about some stupid store in the valley? Why did it have such an effect on us? It's because something real was occurring. And it continued. It didn't stop there, and it's not stopped now.
Just the pure, clean feel of wheels on wood. Imagine yourself 1 inch tall and scrambling for your life. A little southern juice flowing in foreign territory. You've never seen pictures like these before because there's never been any. Money shot for greed. Versatility through open-mindedness. A master of weightless moves. When the going gets going, the going get gone. If this looks high to you, imagine how it looks to him. We were here before, we will be here after. Reflecting and redirecting. Getting free through the backyard. Total dimension in the deep end. Transcending the sex barrier. Downhill. Punk City. Burt. Oasis Banks. Relaxed precision. Eating lunch at home. Wearing out the things that nobody wears. Pressing the peripheries. Burning it up legally. The Catalina Classic. High lines blow minds.